Everyone, welcome. I'm excited to have you here. And tonight on this live Facebook and on this webinar, I've got Roger James Hamilton. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing his message. He's definitely somebody who's got a big vision. He's doing a lot in the world, and it's a time where we're really needing that. So he is a renowned futurist and social entrepreneur. He's the founder of Entrepreneurs Institute and the creator of GeniusU, Wealth Dynamics and Talent Dynamics. And that's been used by over 1 million entrepreneurs to date to help really step into and follow their flow, which is something that I'm really passionate about. I love the combination of systems and flow. And that's in my mind, one of Roger's specialties and really what he's bringing to the world. So Roger, welcome. Thank you for being on.
Good to be here, Morgan. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, Happy New Year to you. And I know this is a different day for you, so thank you for taking the time to be here and have this conversation.
My pleasure.
Yeah, very cool. Well, let's dive in. I know, and I'll be sharing your full bio with everybody a little bit later. You just have done so much. You've done so much in the world, and I love that what you're doing is really helping empower people to become their entrepreneurs, to really take charge of their own life and then be able to spread their impact to create change in the world. So I'm excited to have this conversation. And one of the first things I'm interested in is, in one of my frameworks, I'm always looking at how did people get clarity? How did they know how to step into their next part of life? And you started off in school as an architect. So I would love to hear how you ended up in that very interesting place in transitioning into the world the work that you're doing now.
Well, my dad always wanted to be an architect, and he didn't have a chance to do it. He didn't go to university. And so when I had a chance to go to university, he goes, well, why don't you be an architect? And I'm pretty creative. I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. Go out, design buildings. So I got into Cambridge University in England to study architecture. It was actually the only design-based degree you can do at Cambridge, with drawing boards and everything. And I loved it. It was great. But it was actually while I was at Cambridge that I became an entrepreneur. And actually it had happened because one of the people we got to study, a guy called Buckminster Fuller, who was an architect, he created the geodesic dome. He also was a futurist, and he was talking about the future of the world and this whole concept of the final exam, which is this idea that technology is racing forward. And if we don't increase our human consciousness to actually capture that technology and harness it, then it's going to destroy us. And if we did, we could actually solve all the world's problems. Right? So I got so captured by that whole idea that I thought, well, building buildings is a little bit slow. Building businesses is a way to actually be able to, be connected to more people, learn things faster. And that's how I really started my first business and went through this path, which I've been on now for over 30 years.
Yeah. It's very cool. And I think a lot of times, I think it takes just that one inspiration and we're like, oh, this is actually my path.
Absolutely.
So, and that's a big change. Now, I think the next thing is once we have that clarity or that epiphany or that awakening, it requires sometimes a lot of time, a lot of courage, a lot of strength to get off of the path that we have in front of us and step into that next place. So once you had that clarity, was it a difficult transition or how did you get to yourself to a place to go, I was stepping into this based on my dad, right, on a certain level, and I have this other clarity, so I'm going to take this other pathway. What was that process like for you?
I took the cynic route, which meant it took over 15 years to start to even begin to figure things out. I think this happens to a lot of entrepreneurs. We just have an idea of what we don't want to do. We just want to go get a job or not have an opportunity to reach our full potential. So we go, okay, so I'm going to go out there and do it. But it's a bit like, taking off on a plane without knowing how to fly, right? You end up basically in a super high risk situation. And in my view, running a business is more complicated than flying a plane. So the fact that we don't have to go and get an actual license to run a business today or even learn the basics of it is the reason so many businesses crash. Like, as you know, over 90% of all businesses fail. And I contributed to that statistic because in my first 10 years of business, I failed at least 5 or 6 times, like fully, like the entire business just didn't work. And I had to start all over again. And the shift came when I started finding mentors, right? So I'm sure there's many people listening who are just trying to figure it out on their own, which is by far the worst way to do it.
Yeah.
because that you're actually making mistakes that you could so easily avoid if you were with other people that already knew, what was coming your way. But then as I started finding mentors, and then I actually started finding great communities and networks. And this is back in the 1990s when we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have, people that we could listen to that were going to, share their knowledge with us. So times have changed a lot. But that was basically my experience, was just trying to figure it out for myself, which is not what I would recommend.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I want to let everybody know that's listening that there are some resources that are going to be shared later. You're not just giving everybody like, hey, here's what could be possible and giving them nothing. So everybody stick around. There is going to be a way to kind of help move you forward. And I also think it's important to share these stories because you're on such a level right now that I think it's great for people to hear, like, you tried and failed a number of times in that first decade, or it took you 15 years to make that leap. And I think that gives a lot of other people permission to go, even though I'm not there now, today's, when's the best time to plant a tree? It's a decade ago. When's the next best time? Today. So yeah. So with all those failures, you stepped into it. You've obviously been able to level up. You've been creating some great systems that are helping people. And the most of the work you've done has been international. You've done a lot of work in Asia, Africa, in Europe. Why the US? Why now? Why are you starting to do more of your teaching here locally at this time?
So just to give a bit of a background, when I moved from just running the businesses that I was running, which was mainly in publishing and in property, to then actually, providing tools to some of the entrepreneurs that I was speaking to as a way to just for us to understand what we're doing a little bit better. And it was based here in Singapore about 15 years ago when that started. At that point, I had no, I had no vision that I was going to be out there, speaking around the world or growing a movement, which is what's happening at the moment. And what happened little by little is as a result of this real need that was there for us to have tools to learn how to run a business more effectively. The tools that I was creating started being used by different entrepreneurs in different countries around Asia, first of all, and then around Africa, and then around Europe, and it just grew from there. So what that's meant is within my entrepreneurial mind, which is like, how do you actually create scalable systems? I created 3 different companies, which are the 3 companies that are all part of something called Genius Group today. One of them, the Entrepreneurs Institute side, is the one that runs our events and actually provides the training. And I'll just share a little bit in a moment about like why that training works so well at the moment and why people are using it. But that's grown around the world, and we have city leaders who run city events, which we call Entrepreneur Social. So everything's about making a difference as an entrepreneur. And we have about 70 cities around the world. And wherever someone wants to set up a city, they can. And it just happens that in the last year, more and more cities have started up in America. And so as a result of that, as a city gets to a critical mass, then I can come out and actually do a talk and actually share some of the tools that we have. And that's what's happened in America. So it just happens that at the moment, it may not have happened. It might have been other things that would have taken place instead. But because that's happened, that's why I'm now coming out to the States on the invitation on a number of different people that we have who are actually running city centers. I've also got a tech platform, which is GeniusU, and that's just gone over 1 million entrepreneurs. We have about 1,000 entrepreneurs a day that are joining that, and that allows everyone to find out what their purpose is. They can take the purpose test, which is linked to the United Nations Global Goals, and then they can find out their passions, their talents, linked to other people as well. So it's almost like a LinkedIn for entrepreneurs, and that has also now got many, many people in the US who have just found it, even though we haven't really been in the US, and then grown from there as well. And then my biggest passion is my entrepreneur resorts company, where we actually create resorts and beach clubs around the world. And they're all at the moment in Asia, like Thailand, Bali, then also South Africa, where we actually bring people to them. And we're getting more and more people from America who are coming to those as well. So just as a result of, the water, like when the tide rises, eventually the waterline just gets wider and wider, and eventually it reaches different countries. That's what's happened with us, where it just happens at the moment is all reaching over to the United States.
Very cool. Well, I think it's perfect time. There's obviously a lot going on over here, and your goal is really, if I was to simplify it, it's, empowering entrepreneurs to help change and essentially save the world. And yeah, I think we're excited to have you be coming to the West Coast here in the next month and to be sharing all of that. So with a lot of what you're creating, when I found out about you last year, a coach of mine shared your information and your wealth profile and started helping me learn about who I am so I can be in my flow and showing up the best way in my business. I was really blown away by a lot of it. When I looked further into it, some of your stuff is based on Carl Jung, the I Ching. You've got the chakras being brought into it. You've got the 5 elements that you speak about. So some very like esoteric kind of out there principles, but you've done an amazing job really grounding it out, making it into a system, and having it be not woo-woo, but functional so that people can use it in their business and their lives. How is it that you get clarity about those things? How is it that those things come to you so that you're not recreating the wheel, you're actually creating things that haven't existed on this planet before? So how does that come to you, and how do you integrate it and make it functional for all of us?
Well, I think the best way to look at it, and the reason that you're seeing these links, is because if you think of something that we all know about, GPS, right? Like, we can all find out with our phone where someone else is in the world, like within the square meter, right? Like you can actually get really easy. It's really simple and easy to locate to someone anywhere on the planet. And yet there's more people lost today in the world than ever, right? It's like, because it's not about being physically lost, it's about being metaphysically lost. It's like, well, where should I go? What should I do? And there's so much choice in the world as to how we do that as well. And the metaphysical maps were already created. Like, and it's not even about it being esoteric. It only became esoteric as a result of the scientific revolution, which is like, if you can't prove it, or if you don't have like a basis for what you're going to say, then we don't want to hear it. And that's why there's things like love and spirit and other things that just don't actually fit any kind of like scientific explanation today, that still rule our world, but that we actually know so little about, or how to replicate in the right way. So even like when you talk about flow, which is how do you actually do the most fulfilling thing in your life, there's no scientific method which shows you exactly how to do that, which is why we're also stuck. Whereas our ancestors actually came up with all sorts of different frameworks which allowed them to find these things. And the first one, which is the most important one, which gives us self-awareness, is a concept in Japan, which is called Ikigai. And Ikigai is the intersection of 4 different things that, in the Japanese concept, if we find these 4 things and discover them, we unlock like a combination box, the 4 different things that actually allow us to actually get to our true purpose in life. And those 4 things are, number 1, what we love, which is our passions. Number 2, what we're good at, which is our talents. Number 3, what the world needs, which is our purpose. And number 4, what we can make money with, right? Which is our business model, right? It's like the way we go forward. So what we do as part of really understanding that the very first step for an entrepreneur is not trying to figure out everything else out there, is to figure out yourself, right? It's self-awareness. In fact, there's 3 steps for entrepreneurship, which is self-awareness, self-mastery, self-expression. And each one has got in itself an entire body of knowledge behind it. But you can't start by trying to express yourself when you don't know who you are. So it starts with self-awareness. And so we created these different tools to allow people to get really, really clear very fast on what it is that is their purpose, that is their passions, is their talents. And what you're mentioning in terms of wealth dynamics is one of the tools which allows people to see that by just using your own talents, there's only really 8 different paths which actually allow you to be successful. And all the most successful people, whether Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, right, they all followed one of these paths. And it's not something which I just figured out on my own. It was something that by just really studying, what our great-great-great-grandparents were already knowing, using it and applying it for today, it allows everyone else then to actually use those tools as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of the things I loved is that, I think those ancient technologies, they were all true. They all worked, and we forgot them for a time, and you kind of putting them into frameworks. So our Western mind can reintegrate it and step back into them. I really love and appreciate that. So it's one of the things I've been really attracted to with your work. And, one of the things, go ahead.
Because I realized I didn't quite answer your question as well, which is like, how was it that we came up with this? I think it has a huge amount to do with the fact that being in the East, because I live in Bali right now, I travel mainly around Asia, but now, as we talk about spending more time in Europe and the US, in the East, like when you're in Bali, like a lot of people in the US come out to Bali and they go, wow, like why didn't I come out here earlier? Because there's an energy to certain places in the world where they still have got all the base knowledge. They're still living off that as well. They're fulfilled, they're happy, and it's coming from a space where they're actually just more connected to that same spirit, which we all need when we're running a business in terms of our entrepreneurial spirit as well. So I think that's a huge part of it, which is why we like to say that while I come to America, I'm gonna say, hey, come out to Asia, come out and actually be on a safari in Africa, be on a paddy field in Bali, and actually just experience, what nature already is telling us about cycles of time, which we need to harness if we're actually going to be successful as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Totally agree. One thing that I had caught you saying was around the Buckminster Fuller stuff, that as technology is raising, we've got enough technology to take care of the planet. What's going to be necessary is that our consciousness matches that so we can actually utilize it. And so I'm really curious, for somebody like you that's showing up in the world in a really positive and a big way, what kind of things are you doing maybe on a daily or weekly or a monthly basis to make sure that your consciousness is raising and evolving so that you can be a part of that solution?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll share a story that just showed up this week. And it's about two teenage girls, right? So they're the Wishton girls. They basically went to a school which I so I set up the board of the Green School. So the Green School is fairly well known around the world as like the school. It was set up by John Hardy and Cynthia Hardy, and they set it up as a way to educate children on a totally different way of thinking about the world, where they can be resourceful, where they can make a difference in the world. My children went to Green School. After setting up the board, I was the chairman of the board for several years, and we basically put in place a whole framework which allowed someone who's like a teenager, 10-year-old, to be already knowing that they can go and change the world. And what happened was, with these two girls, they decided to take on the cause of plastic bags, which obviously is massive all around the world as an issue. Mm-hmm. In Bali, it's a massive issue. And basically started campaigning. So they created a campaign called Bye Bye Plastic Bags. They started campaigning, getting people to begin with simple things like just going on beach walks in the mornings, on the weekends, picking up the plastic, then starting to go up to their our government and saying, can we change the rules here? Can we change what's happening? They managed to get petitions to get the Indonesian government itself to actually make commitments. And just this month, the entire island of Bali has made a commitment that it will no longer be using single-use plastic bags, right? So then that's all happened as a result of two teenage girls, where they were impacted by the environment that they were in and by the fact that they can actually make that difference. And so I see that on a day-by-day basis with entrepreneurs, with kids, and what I do personally myself is just keep creating the environments where people realize that you don't need to wait for the government. You do not need to wait for companies. I think in America it's very difficult, because in America, if you turn on the news, it's 24/7 talking about the government, talking about what's not working, talking about things which actually is so easily allow us to distract ourselves from the power we already have ourselves. And it takes our power away. It makes us think, well, we can't do things because, China's competing against us, or we can't do things because of, the government doing this or doing that. And as a result of all that thinking, we end up missing out on the whole point of why we're here, which is to raise our consciousness. If anything, we don't want our consciousness. So the whole thing that I focus at is how do we create environments to increase consciousness, and then to bring people who are at a high level of consciousness together such that they realize not just that they can make a difference, but every day that they're not making a difference, they're actually missing out on their true reason for being here on the planet in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. A big word that comes to mind when I've been looking through all your stuff is synergy. Like, I like some of the people you've partnered with, like with the Passion Test. I like seeing how you're bringing puzzle pieces together to actually make puzzles that help change and transform the world. So
I think the biggest synergies in the world at the moment are happening cross country. I think it's when it's easier today to grow a global business than a local business, because a global, like everyone who's listening to this, your biggest market probably isn't your closest market. There's people right now in Singapore, or people in China, or people in Japan that could do with your service even more than the people in your city right now. In fact, if anything, in a place like America, there's a lot that the US has done in the likes of Silicon Valley, some of the fastest growing companies in the world, that are now being overtaken by companies which are in Asia. And it's because the people in Asia are looking at what's happening in America. Jack Ma with Alibaba started as an English teacher, where he went over to the States, learned things, went back to China, set up Alibaba. And there's so many stories like that, where people effectively, when they travel, are time traveling, right? You travel to the US, you're traveling to the future, then you travel back to the past, and then you apply the things that you've learned. And too often people in the US are unaware of just what a gold mine they think they're sitting on, which isn't a gold mine of resources, it's a gold mine of knowledge, right? And to actually use that and then go out to the parts of the world where actually you could have the most impact. And you don't have to even live there. You can still live in the US, but to actually travel out, see how to be of value, collaborate with people in different countries where you can actually bring your value to them as well, make money by doing good as well as doing well. And then off the back of that, you're going to find you not just live a more fulfilling life, but you have a far bigger impact as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about like some of your stuff that you're talking about for the upcoming entrepreneur fast track that's happening here on the West Coast. It's about 10 timing your business, but you also bring in 10 times in your life in there, and really having that balance of both pieces and being able to live where you want and provide for your family and do what you're wanting to do on that level. When you're pulling all of this together, how do you balance those pieces out? How do you decide this is going to work in business, this is going to work in life, this will work in all of these? Has your focus always been on, let's say, saving the world based on what you learned through Buckminster Fuller? Or is it been about life experience? Is it about soul expression and consciousness? Do you focus in on one and then the rest kind of come from there? Or are you holding all of them at the same time?
So I think the biggest, just to step back for a moment on what's the highest priority for people in life, because there will be some people, even listening to this, who will be saying, what I really want to do, if I could do anything different, is figure out a way that I can just have more time with my family, right? Or some people will be saying, what I really want to do is just find a really smart way to be able to get my message out to more people, right? Or it could be that, like, the big thing I really want to do is I really want to be able to support this particular cause. Everyone's got a different thing that's their thing. I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people have when they think about their job, and that includes people who run their own business, is they start by thinking that their job is like a means of paid productivity. It's like, I've got to be productive to do something, and therefore I can be paid for it. And that's like, if that's your definition of a job, which is paid productivity, then you're in big trouble, because obviously, and like machines, artificial intelligence, computers, robots will be able to always be more productive than you in everything eventually. And most of them don't even need to be paid. So you're always going to lose your job as a result. So all the people in fear that they're going to lose their job is because they're defining a job as being something based on paid productivity. Now, if you rethink that, like what we did at the Green School and what we're doing now with our Genius School programs, is we say, no, we're going to redefine a job as not something which is based on paid productivity. It's something based on paid self-expression, right? Because if it's about paid self-expression, then if your ultimate self-expression is playing the guitar, then you'd be able to figure out a way to actually make money playing the guitar, right? If your ultimate self-expression is to be able to go out and help people out of poverty, then that's what you should go and do and get paid for it. And so, and of course, computers, artificial intelligence, robots can help you to actually be better at expressing yourself, but they can never replace you at expressing yourself. So you're always going to have a job. So I think entrepreneurship, the only difference of an entrepreneur and an employee is an employee is someone who needs to go and get a job to get paid, whereas an entrepreneur is someone who can create a job. Right? And if they can create a job for themselves, you're never going to be out of a job. And more importantly, you can create it for other people as well. And so you can actually learn how to do that, but you're never taught that at school, or at least not the traditional schooling system. So for me, the most important thing to begin with is not here's a formula to go and do X. Like, here's a formula to go and be better at social media, right? Or here's a formula to go and buy properties. It's more starting by saying, wait, all of that is just vehicles to take you somewhere. The real question is, where do you want to go? So the most important thing is to actually get clear to begin with where do you want to be? Like, if you've got a map, you're still going to be lost unless you know where you are and where you're going. So where are you right now? Like, who are you? And where do you really want to go if it could be anything? And that's a really tough question for most people, because most people aren't thinking about the fact that anything's possible. But if you do think that, for some people, it isn't about going out and traveling around the world and going crazy, trying to make a big difference. For some people, it is just about having a fulfilling life, right? Which is absolutely fine, because if self-expression is that for you, then that's what you do. So really super important that a lot of the tools that we use are for self-mastery. But like I said, self-awareness, first of all, get self-awareness, be really clear what your self-expression is. And then the self-mastery leads you towards what that is, whatever that happens to be. And you mentioned the events that we have in America. The Entrepreneur Fast Track is about starting by saying, well, what actually is most important to you, and finding out what that is first. And then from there, okay, what's the fastest, smartest way to get there, given that there's already other people out there already achieving 10 times more than every one of us, including myself, like on the planet right now today, just because they found smarter vehicles to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your combination of all those frameworks. And I think a lot of times there'll be that idea of, be in flow, be intuitive, it needs to be really just coming from from that place. And a lot of times there aren't grounded systems and frameworks that allows that to actually get done what needs to be done. And then we have the opposite side of that, where there's hustle, and there's like, have great frameworks, have great hustle, but it leaves the other piece out. And I like how all your systems just work together to find that balance and really play off of all those different strong parts. So
I think that, I mean, that point on hustle, because I mean, obviously people like Gary Vee and others in the US have popularized hustle. And I think it's really, I mean, hustle's good, but it's really dangerous if it's taken in the wrong context.
Yeah.
Like, so for example, in Bali, surfers surf, but I can tell you the surfers only hustle for that small period of time when they've got the wave, they're getting on their board and they're paddling like crazy. And it's for a very short period of time for only one reason, which is to get on surfing, right? And the real action happens when they start surfing. And there is no hustling when you're surfing, right? It's like, it's all flow. Yeah. I think that too often, while hustle is what you need, if you know what the flow is going to be and you actually know when it's going to be, and I will hustle sometimes and it'll be for a week or 2 weeks to get to a certain place and then everything takes off. But if I'm hustling week after week, month after month, something's wrong, right? It means I'm paddling against the current. It means I'm going the wrong direction. And I'm seeing too many people in the world doing that, where they think that, hustle for hustle's sake is the point of it, until they exhaust themselves out, they burn everyone else out around them. And then they keep on going because they think that somehow there's some pride in the fact that they're still working hard when everyone else has dropped. That's not the way to get to true success, because it's not about working hard, it's about working smart. And it's about actually putting in that hustle when you need to, because you see the wave coming. But nature gives you waves all the time. And there are right now waves that every one of us can surf within our industry, within what's happening in different markets in different countries, where we can already get 10, 100 times the results we're getting by getting on the wave, as opposed to not even thinking about the wave and just working as hard as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. I really feel like it is kind of a shadow side of US productivity. We're taught to hustle. And a lot of times it's not based on what we're good at. It's not based on what we're passionate about. And it's not based on something that's helping serve a bigger purpose. And it's not sustainable. I think it's one of the reasons we're one of the most unhealthy countries on the planet. So I love, again, seeing that balance of, you're obviously productive, you're obviously doing very well in the world, and you're bringing that balance piece in and supporting people and finding that for themselves. So
the definition that I prefer, is the distinction between working hard and hard work. Because you can have a mom or a dad working hard with a family, and at no point do they feel it's hard work, because they're loving it, because it's what they're meant to do, it's because they love their kids. And if someone goes, wow, you're working real hard, they'd be like, yeah, I am, but I don't feel like I'm working hard at all, right? Or someone like Warren Buffett, who says, if there's one thing I can teach people, is that they should be following their passion. It's not like he doesn't work hard, but he doesn't feel like it's hard work, right? Because again, it's what he loves to do. So it's really super important. Like, if you feel like what you're doing is hard work, which means that, it's like, well, this is tough, right? Or this is exhausting me, as opposed to every hour that you're actually doing what you love, you're actually energizing yourself more, you're actually exhausting yourself more. There's a massive distinction. It's the same two words, right? And for me, those, like, words are everything, right? In the same way that you can always find a way that you can be working hard on something without it ever feeling like work, if you just add one word to work, which is the word life. Like, I mean, if you wake up in the morning and said, today I'm waking up to my work, well, then you're going to be working hard, and it's going to be hard work. However, if you wake up every day saying, I'm waking up to my life's work, which means you're actually working up to your purpose, then that pulls you forward, right? You're not having to push yourself. You're not having to push yourself out of bed, push yourself to do the next thing, because you're getting pulled by it. And that's, again, talking about current, it's talking about tide, it's talking about flow, that you use flow that's all around you. And we can create that dynamic tension within ourselves to be able to every day not just be making a bigger impact, but actually make life a whole lot easier for ourselves, because we're now doing the thing that we know we're meant to be doing.
Yeah. It's key. I think it's key. If we all know that, then we know which piece of the puzzle we're supposed to put in to help all of this work out the way it's supposed to. So yeah, I love that. So I've got a couple questions here. Are you open to answering a couple questions at the tail end of our conversation today? Awesome. So this is from Mickey, and she's asking if you can speak to the differences that being in your wealth flow makes.
As opposed when you're not in it and when you are in it, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So a good analogy that I would give is if you think about this a little bit like sport, if you play any kind of sport, when you're in your flow in sport, I mean, they call it the zone. But what happens when you're in that zone is because every time that you get the ball, you just pass it where it's meant to be or you score, everyone starts passing the ball. So there's a couple of distinctions that happen the moment you start getting into your flow. The first one that happens is, well, first of all, obviously you don't have to work as hard in terms of things you shouldn't be doing because you're just being swept along on the things that you already should be doing, and it's natural for you to do it. So you actually can go through a day being fully energized, and it means you're healthier, it means you're happier, it means that you're actually much more fulfilled in what you're doing. So that's the first thing, which is something that's very personal. But then something else happens at a second level, which is you attract much, much more resources because people can see that when someone's in flow, they can take on so much more, and they're also connected to so much more people. Richard Branson's a perfect example of this, right? He spends most of his time on Necker Island. He's got multiple billion-dollar businesses, but he's just in flow the whole time. And when asked, what do you do if your business isn't working? He says, I go to the gym. I look after myself because the universe is always going to be that reflection. In the same way, it's like, hey, if you're not going to pass the ball, don't go shouting for the ball. Just work on your kicking, work on being a better footballer and getting into your flow. Because the moment you do, everyone's going to be passing you the ball. So the second thing is that you just have this phenomena happen where everything gets attracted your way. And then the third thing, which is the one that I love the best, is this magical thing happens in the universe beyond just you being attracted physical resources like connections, like knowledge. You're also then actually attracting the universe itself. Like there's this power that happens, which Carl Jung calls synchronicity, where the universe is always looking around for where should all the energy be going, and it'll always put the energy to wherever there's most energy. And so if you're already in that energy and you're in that flow, it will pass it your way. Whereas if you're actually against the flow, it's going to bypass you every time. So you then end up with luck happening. You end up with your own like waking up in the middle of the night with that new idea, which you thought, where did that even come from? Yeah. You know what it was? It got showed up from somewhere. But all that magic happens. Buckminster Fuller calls this lag. He says the lag time between your manifestation and reality will reduce as you get more into flow. And it can be years where you kind of say, I wish I had this, and you just don't get it ever because you're so not in flow, you're not doing what you're meant to do. And the more you get into flow and alignment, then the shorter the lag time becomes until eventually you can be thinking, oh, if I only had this person, and then the next thing the phone rings and that person's calling up, right? So I think that's the magical part. And a lot of people would say, well, that's the stuff I don't believe in. But once you get into flow, anyone who's in flow, they experience it, right? In the same way that each of these three things are different phenomena at different levels.
Yeah. I love that all the things that people would say they don't believe in, you can give them an example where it's happened to them in their life numerous times. And then they're like, oh yeah, well, I've had that, but I don't believe in that other word. So absolutely. Yeah. And I love that your frameworks are helping us again to have a way to get into that flow, kind of from a conscious level so that the other pieces can happen. So, with your upcoming events, you're going to be in Seattle. Actually, you're going to be in LA on the 15th of this month, San Diego on the 17th. You'll be in Mexico on January 29th. You'll be up here in Seattle on February 1st. You're going to be helping us 10 times our businesses, 10 times our life, 10 times how we're able to work with teams. What is it? A lot of times people don't necessarily understand that this might be for them, because they don't have a business yet, or they feel like their business is doing great. What would you share with them that they're going to be getting out of this event? Why should they make it a priority to come spend a day with you and see what's possible?
So one of the biggest things we will unwrap at this event when we're together is something called the impact meter. And the impact meter is about these levels of impact that you can have, which are all 10 times the one from the one below. And it's all about the vehicle that you choose. So for example, if right now I was to say to everyone on this call, okay, like let's just do an experiment. Let's just go for an hour. And after an hour, you have to be like 4 kilometers away somewhere, right? Most people just walk to get there 4 kilometers away. If I said you had to be at a zero, right? You have to be 40 kilometers away. Most people would like take a car, right? If I said you had to be 400 kilometers away and add another zero, most people would figure out a way to do it by taking a plane. If I said 4,000 kilometers, they'd take a rocket, right? So everyone can figure out a way to 10 times, 10 times, 10 times. The only difference of each of those 10 times was you changed the vehicle that you were in. Businesses today are at different levels of vehicles. And I see a lot of people that want to be the rocket ship, and they're cycling like crazy with the vehicle they've got, wondering why they can't actually increase the size they're doing. And I see this not just with people that are just getting started. I see this with people that have got like, 400-500 people businesses doing multiple millions, and they're stuck as well. Like, how do I get to that next level up? And they know there's other people that are actually doing, the $1 billion when someone's doing 100 million, someone's doing 10 million. But how do I do that? And every time it's about having to unlearn. You have to get off your vehicle and retool the vehicle to the next level up, because at each level, there's higher levels of scalability in what you need to do and the way you do it. And so when you come to this, it's more, I've seen quite a few different people in the US talk about 10 times because it's a nice thing to talk about, and we are living in exponential times. But this is an actual physical framework which allows you to very clearly not just work with yourself, but with your team to go, right, here's where we're going now. And so it's very practical. And the reason that it's called the impact meter is, yes, it does 10 times your income, but more because it 10 times your customer base. But more importantly, it's also 10 times the impact you can have in the world as well. And as you actually lift up to a high level, you then attract much, much better people, because people today are much more interested in working with people that are out there making a difference in the world than ones that are out there just doing it for the money.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I love about your frameworks. A lot of times a framework will get presented as, here's the only one thing that you need. And it doesn't talk about, sometimes, the analogy of, if, let's say you're driving in fourth gear right now and I'm in second gear. If I try to drive my car the same way, it's going to stall out. It won't work. And I like, even in your wealth profile pieces, you're like, cool, here's how you get from, infrared to red, from red to orange. The system that lifts you up initially will hold you back at a certain point. So you shift systems. And I like that that's a part of this other piece as well. So it just, it intuitively makes sense.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest killers of too much information. There was a time we didn't have enough people giving us advice. We're now in a world where there's too many people giving us advice. And the most important thing is exactly what you say, is to be able to have a clear enough filter to know that everyone's advice is probably good to someone at some level, but there's only a particular piece of advice right now, which is right for you right now. And understanding what the framework is, where the map is, based on where you're at, as to what is the best thing for you to do right now, as opposed to everything else, allows you to zoom right into that thing. And that's so critical for all of us to be doing today. So coming back to the event, number one definitely is getting really, really practical tools that allow you to go, okay, I get this. Now I've got the framework. I'm going to go use that in a way that allows me to see the difference I'm going to make. The other obvious thing is that just opening everyone's minds to what's going on around the world, and realizing just the fact that, the United States has got like less than 5% of the entire planet's population in it. And there's another 95% out there. And we are going through these incredible renaissance periods in many different countries around the world that everyone in the US really should know about. So there's going to be a whole conversation around that and what those tools are. And we get very hands-on at the actual event. It's not just me speaking on stage. We actually take case studies from the audience. We actually see what can happen when we go out and see what's happening around the world with a company like that allows it to 10 times straight away. And of course, at the end of the day, when you've got, as always, a group of like-minded people from the same city showing up together, then you actually then also have a tribe that really helps support you with all of this thinking as you're going through on your journey as well.
Yeah, tremendous synergy with that. So as we're kind of winding down towards the end here, if you had this one opportunity, you're going to get to share something that would be broadcast out to the entire world. It's like your one takeaway for people. What would that be? What would you leave them with?
My big thing I would leave everyone with is just coming back to this whole concept of wealth, worth, and my definition of wealth, which is it's not how much money you have, it's what you're left with if you lose all your money. It's there's such a huge fear at the moment, especially in the US, from what I see around the world. There's such a fear of what can be lost or what you need to hold on to. And when you actually start from scratch and saying, holy cow, there's probably someone in the world today who has nothing, and he might be 20 years old or she might be 20 years old, and she's going to end up with a business in the next 2 years, which is going to be 100 times the size of what I'm doing. And it's actually because they weren't worried about what they have to lose. They were actually starting with what they actually can have to gain, and starting from that place, which is that already today, what every one of us already has in terms of knowledge, connections, trust with people around us, is worth so much more than any money you have. And when we actually re-tap ourselves back to that wealth, then we have so much more that we can get started with. And wherever you're at today, whether you're already successful, whether you're someone who's basically struggling at the moment with making ends meet, the fact you can recreate all of it in a very short period of time, as others already are, it all comes back down to just letting go of the fear of what you might lose, and then actually putting yourself in a place where you've got everything to gain.
Yeah. Everything you've shared that I've read, that I've seen online, that you've shared tonight, incredibly empowering. I'm really grateful for the work you're doing in the world. I'm really grateful for your time today and coming on and sharing with all of us, and really looking forward to, yeah, getting the real experience in person here in just a few short weeks. So thank you for everything, Roger. I'm really grateful.
That's great. Thanks for having me on as well, Morgan.
All
Cheers.
right. Cheers.
Bye.
Be well.